Hello, and welcome to my recording of the report that I've been spreading around because I want to make sure people understand it. Also, I just updated it. I hadn't updated this in a while, and so there was some information in it that was slightly out of date. So I fixed it. We're going to review it so that you can see how feasible it is to lock these upcoming primaries down by casting ballots by precinct. It seems like a small incremental shift. It's a very meaningful one. It's going to restore auditability by protecting ballot secrecy. When you keep all of the ballots of a precinct together, you can't pull anybody's ballot by identifying that this is the one person from this precinct who voted here, or these are the two people from this precinct who voted here. There are other ways to identify people's votes, which is unfortunate because the system that we're currently using does not protect ballot secrecy. But if you protect ballot secrecy by casting all of the ballots of a precinct together, you are inherently protecting auditability by eliminating the need for post-election redaction, which is what we got for exposing the exacerbated ballot secrecy issue facilitated by the countywide polling place program, countywide vote centers. The entire philosophy of casting regular ballots at any location countywide, as this happens in a lot of counties and in a lot of states, that has destroyed our auditability. This is part of why they weren't giving us any of the records after 2020. It's because they were probably afraid we would see this. And we did. It took us a while. They're now, instead of saying, oh, okay, we should reverse that and go back to voting by precinct, they're kind of doubling down and saying, first they said it didn't happen. You'll remember that. Then we confirmed it. It was confirmed anyways, not in my favorite way at all. But then they said, okay, fine. Redact everything. That has destroyed our auditability, and it has not fixed the ballot secrecy issue. Besides, like I said, there are other ways to identify votes. Covering it up so that only the state can see that there's a ballot secrecy issue there, that's not the solution. In fact, they're like the last people who should be seeing how we voted, are public employees. And no one should see it. You can't hide behind ballot secrecy to destroy auditability, because ballot secrecy and auditability should go hand in hand. And it's pretty simple. You just cast all of the ballots of a precinct together in person in the ballot box that precinct's assigned to, or provisionally, and they are scrutinized, approved, sorted, and counted by precinct at the ballot board. Those are the two ways that you ensure ballot secrecy for in-person voters. That protects auditability. I'm going to go through this. This is the policy brief on how the federally mandated use of provisional ballots satisfies state requirements for countywide access. Okay? And my subtitle here, you see, keeping precinct records intact while satisfying countywide access, kept simple. There's very little that's simple about this, but you guys work the elections, and the audience that I'm addressing with this is the executive committees across the state. We can do this. We have to do this. Auditability, ballot secrecy, and chain of custody are state and federal law. You can't violate them. Background. Federal law already mandates that no voter requesting a ballot may be turned away. Regardless of when or how we make the switch back to precinct-level voting, there will be an initial uptick in provisional ballots. This fact must be accepted by ballot board workers in primary elections who have become accustomed to the ease and convenience of unsecured election procedures. Because some of you know exactly who you are who are complaining that I don't want to have to process any more provisional ballots. Well, because voters are all accustomed to voting anywhere, you're going to have an initial uptick in provisional ballots when you switch back to voting by precinct. There will be an adjustment period. And it wasn't that long ago that we voted by precinct. In 2019, Heider switched us over to the countywide vote centers, Heider and the Commissioner's Court. Before that, we were voting by precinct on election day. And from 2002, we've been using provisional ballots. It's not going away. Provisional ballots act as a fail-safe, ensuring all eligible voters are able to cast their ballot while allowing the county a chance to confirm the voter's eligibility prior to the ballot being cast. State-level countywide vote center authorizations do not guarantee any voter a regular, non-provisional ballot at any polling location, and they cannot guarantee that. The legislature knows that they cannot predict what voter ID criteria each voter will appear with to request a ballot. You don't know if someone's going to show up with no ID. You don't know if someone's going to show up and they just landed in the state and request a ballot. You can't just give everyone a regular ballot. Provisional ballots are there for an additional layer of scrutiny. This is a security method that's aimed at ensuring that legal voters can cast a ballot. Okay? It's aimed at preserving an auditable paper trail. It's aimed at election security. And that's what we're standing on it for in this report. And ideally in the upcoming primaries. I concede we may not have time to do the entire hand count, but I will not concede that we don't have time to lock both early voting and election day down by precinct in order to adhere to federal and state auditability, ballot secrecy, and chain of custody laws. To guarantee every voter a regular ballot at every location eliminates the need for any voter ID, registration, or eligibility requirements and would be patently absurd to do. In precinct-based voting, voters can choose to vote a regular ballot at their assigned polling location or provisional ballot at any other location they are not assigned to. Provisional voters can easily be accommodated with their proper ballot style, as their ballot style is generated upon check-in with the epoll books. We can lock these elections down by precinct without changing anything and with minimal production costs. And we have to do this. We can use those epoll books, but what we're not going to do is rely on those epoll books to determine who gets a regular ballot. We can check all the voters in on the epoll books. Even provisional voters can be checked in on the epoll books. And we can honor even provisional voters with their proper ballot style using the epoll books, because that generates the code for the BMDs. But if their name is not on the paper poll book for that location, that's what we will use to determine who gets a regular ballot. If their name's not on that list at the beginning of the election cycle, they vote provisionally. No more of this people being added to the voter registration files 3 or 4 days into the election and then casting a regular ballot. And then sometimes being popped back into suspense mode. No more of that. We're going to have scrutiny over why people are added late into the election cycle. Like 3 or 4 days into an election, their names are being added then to the voter list. Though we have an explanation for that, it's totally unacceptable, and we need to let the legislature know how large of a problem that is. Provisional voters can easily be accommodated with their proper ballot style at any location, as their ballot style is generated upon check-in with the epoll books, which can still be used in a modern precinct-based system to prevent double voting. Paper poll books, and that's basically all we would use them for in my proposal. We're just using those epoll books to let the county know who voted, and they have the additional benefit of being the exact item that generates the ballot style. So we can actually give provisional voters their right ballot style. And if you work the elections, you know how that's kind of different from the previous ways of conducting elections by precinct. And it's actually better. We're enfranchising more voters. We're not risking any voters being able to vote for all the races they should be able to vote for, and all the candidates aren't going to miss out on any votes. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. Paper poll books, when used as the list of which voters can vote a regular ballot at a given location, will be the official turnout record for both the precinct and the polling location. So that epoll book will have information, but it's not the official paper record, which is mandated by federal law. The paper poll book is doing this. Dallas still does this. They have their epoll books and paper poll books. Paper poll books containing the names of all expected voters from a given precinct are part of the federally mandated auditable paper trail. One hard copy paper poll book for each precinct assigned to a polling location and the use of provisional ballots is a transparent method which allows all voters access while allowing the county a chance to prevent the casting and counting of unlawful ballots. Dallas County has historically used both epoll books and paper poll books for official voter check-ins each day of every election cycle. This is not unheard of, the cost is negligible, yet the shift is a meaningful one. Once an unlawful ballot is cast, it cannot be taken back out. The damage will have been done, and our focus must be on the prevention of unlawfully cast ballots. Voting by precinct accomplishes just that, in a meaningful way. Keeping precinct records intact while satisfying countywide access kept simple. After working with countless patriots across the nation on reported issues in election security, among the most serious concerns among voters, and I used among twice in one sentence, okay? All right, I'll fix it later. One of the biggest concerns is the use of countywide vote centers. Just an aside, even people that don't even think about the hacking, they don't care about that kind of stuff, they don't think that it's like a widespread issue, maybe they don't really care about a hand count, you know? Even people that are kind of like not so sympathetic to that aspect agree that countywide vote centers have created issues that we just did not have before and that we shouldn't have to be dealing with. In fact, the Tarrant County Executive Committee, Dallas County, other GOP executive committees have passed resolutions in favor of returning to voting by precinct to eliminate some of the new issues that we've got, which include, but are not limited to, ballot secrecy violations and the redaction of records to cover up the ballot secrecy violations. In multiple reports seen here, and here, and I've got some more reports linked here. This is on my Substack. You can get it at tbtr.us. It's free. Our collaborative work has outlined the findings of several independent election integrity activists who found that in counties using countywide vote centers, many voters' ballots are easily reconciled with their name at check-in in publicly available records. This means that some Texas voting systems fail to preserve the anonymity of the ballot when paired with epoll books in countywide vote centers, leading to the explosive reporting that resulted in the Secretary of State's order to redact a variety of post-election information, destroying our ability to audit election records, allegedly evidenced by now obsolete chain of custody. If you're going to redact all the election records, what's the point of even filling out the chain of custody? What's the point of conducting an election? What's the point of us turning out to vote? Secretary of State's not worried about that. Why are they going to be worried about that? They're going to pretend to be worried about that, but they're not really. And we'll go over why in a minute. We'll go over how you can tell what's a sincere concern and effort and what's a feign. Okay? In multiple reports from Texas candidate for HD 108, this is an old report, Barry Warnick, and Tarrant County resident, now candidate, Susan Valiant, we have seen documented findings showing that in counties using countywide vote centers, many voters' ballots can be easily matched with their name through publicly available check-in records. What first appeared as isolated one-off cases quickly grew into evidence that hundreds of thousands of ballots across Texas could be tied back to individual voters. This privacy violation is found across a variety of systems, and not one vendor is solely responsible for this phenomenon. Okay. If I seem like I'm being redundant in this report, that's intentional. I'm trying to hammer these points home because often when I just say it once, I guess I'm making several heavy points and it takes people a while to process each one. So I'm being redundant and saying how this reinforces this, reinforces this, reinforces this. Historically, ballot secrecy has only been at risk with absentee voting, or has mainly been at risk with absentee voting, and early voting in person if you vote county-wide for early voting. A concern election offices should have been informing voters about. In-person voting was conducted by precinct, so all ballots of a precinct were cast together, inherently preserving auditability and ballot secrecy. But the adoption of countywide vote centers has exponentially worsened the privacy problem. When only one voter from a given precinct votes in a given polling location, or only one person votes absentee for their precinct, their ballot is easily reconcilable through public records. Married couples who are the only ones from their precincts to vote in a given location can see one another's ballots from precinct reports, CVRs, and voter turnout files. Like I said, there's multiple ways to do it, which is why the SOS panicked and ordered the redaction of a variety of election records to try and stop. Not to stop us. I should rephrase. That's their wording. To cover up what we found. Prevent us from finding more. Using countywide vote centers, even in-person voters are not guaranteed ballot secrecy, as there is no control over where anyone else in their own precincts vote. The illusion of countywide vote centers providing voters with more options has facilitated the overlooking of this exacerbated issue. It's not a matter of voter choice because voters were never informed that casting a ballot outside of their precinct would eliminate their guarantee of ballot secrecy, leading to redaction of ballots and other election records, destroying auditability as well. We didn't know that. And if they had told us that, we probably would have said, you know what, I'll just keep voting in the one closest to my house. It's not a problem. It's not actually a problem. Got 2 weeks of early voting, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and then election day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I can even get there late. If there's a line and the line goes out the door, I can stay there as late as I want to vote. It's really not a problem. But they didn't tell the voters about this issue. They didn't tell the voters that adopting the countywide polling place program, which eliminates the final bastion of precinct level voting on election day, destroyed the voters' last option for a method of voting that guaranteed them ballot secrecy. And that's what led to the destruction of our auditable paper trail, which is why they wouldn't give us the ballots after 2020 once they started making the shift. You see? You connecting the dots? I know you are. I know you are. If you're watching this, you know what I'm talking about. You're already here. You might not agree with me on everything, but you know what I'm talking about. We should be able to look at those records without being able to tell whose ballots they are. Anyways, the only solution offered from the Texas Secretary of State to state election officials was to order the redaction of election records to prevent post-election ballot reconciliation. But this approach directly undermines several state laws, as well as the federal mandate for auditability. 52 U.S. Code 21081, voting system standards, okay? Wherein A, requirements, 2, audit capacity. A, the voting system shall produce a record with an audit capacity for such a system. B, manual audit capacity. The voting system shall produce a permanent paper record with a manual audit capacity. The system must allow the voter to correct errors before the permanent paper record is produced. And the paper record shall serve as the official record for any recount. Redacting records in the name of secrecy destroys the ability to audit elections, a direct violation of federal law. Precinct-based voting and provisional ballots. Before countywide vote centers, voters were assigned to a precinct polling place where the ballots would have been pre-printed with only the ballot styles for those precinct polling places. Another side note, they'd also be sequentially pre-numbered. If not listed in the paper poll book, or if their eligibility was questioned, they cast a provisional ballot. Provisional ballots have been federally mandated since the passage of the Help America Vote Act of 2002, which means countywide access to voting has been guaranteed nationwide since 2003. Countywide access does not mean regular ballots at every location. It just means they have to be able to cast a ballot at every location. Federal use of provisional voting requires that, here's 52 U.S.C. 21082, provisional voting and voting information requirements. This is the federal law, okay? Federal law. This regulates all the states. If an individual declares that such individual is a registered voter in the jurisdiction in which the individual desires to vote, and that the individual is eligible to vote in an election for federal office, but the name of the individual does not appear on the official list of eligible voters for the polling place, or an election official asserts that the individual is not eligible to vote, such individual shall be permitted to cast a provisional ballot as follows. And then it goes into how you cast a provisional ballot. It's right there. Like, you give them the ballot as best you can, okay? And the ballot board will determine later, were they eligible to vote? Maybe it's not the voter's fault that they weren't on the list. Maybe the voter did everything they were supposed to do. Okay? Or maybe not. Maybe they shouldn't be voting, and this is what provisional ballots are for. Thus, provisional ballots already satisfy any state-level requirement for countywide access while preserving precinct-level-based voting to restore auditable paper records, guarantee ballot secrecy, and strengthen our chain of custody for precinct returns by keeping all ballots of a precinct together. This will inherently allow for speedy, accurate, and affordable recounts, which every candidate will appreciate. How countywide vote centers took hold with e-poll books. The push for countywide vote centers came alongside the introduction of electronic poll books. Just as paper poll books pair naturally with precinct-level elections, electronic poll books were sold as necessary for countywide systems. After the passage of HAVA, offering states funding to modernize their election methods, the provisional ballot mandate was a perfect lead-in to the transition away from paper poll books into computerized poll books with internet connectivity. The concept was that you do not need to use as many provisional ballots if anyone can cast a regular ballot at any location, as opposed to voting in their assigned precinct location closest to their registered home address. Many states authorized the use of countywide vote centers and either were simply not briefed on the potential exacerbation of the existing ballot secrecy issue with absentee voting, or they deliberately did not inform the voters of the concern when they moved to adopt e-poll books in order to switch to countywide voting. Mixing ballots across the county has rendered audits and recounts too time-consuming and laborious to conduct in full. Hours are required simply for sorting ballots from all polling locations across the county. Regardless, countywide vote centers were incorporated into many state election procedures, including passing laws that allow this where it was previously expressly prohibited. The argument was convenience, to allow voters to cast a regular ballot anywhere without duplicate voting. But the reality of this method is electronic poll books require internet, gotta be careful here, connectivity. They can fail or go offline, leaving systems unable to prevent duplicate votes, and they create unnecessary security vulnerabilities. Countywide vote centers appear to have been a facade to push electronic poll books into elections nationwide. This is further evidenced by lobbying from voting system vendors and election-themed NGOs, which aggressively promoted countywide vote centers after HAVA's passage. returning to secure precinct-based voting, which we can still do for this upcoming primary, not only in Texas, but in other states as well. HAVA already ensures that no eligible voter is denied a ballot. Really, any voter that requests one, you can give them a ballot. We just might not count it if you're not eligible. Provisional ballots are the federally mandated fail-safe. They provide countywide access while still allowing ballots to be cast and counted at the precinct level, preserving both secrecy and auditability. Restoring precinct-based voting would mean voters cast regular ballots at their assigned precinct or assigned polling place. E-poll books used only for voter check-in and ballot-style production. Paper poll books determine who cast a regular ballot into the ballot box. Voters who appear at location where they are not assigned can still vote their proper ballot style by casting a provisional ballot as federal law requires. Ballots remain grouped by precinct, ensuring accurate election night reporting, speedy recounts and audits, preserving anonymity, and strengthening the chain of custody. This approach preserves countywide access without compromising precinct integrity, restores accurate precinct-level election night reporting, protects ballot secrecy by eliminating cross-precinct reconciliation risks, and there's a few ways to do that. Supports auditability through hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots, relies on existing federal law to ensure no voter is turned away, adheres to state and federal mandates of auditability, ballot secrecy, and chain of custody. And with a stronger chain of custody, this system restores transparency, security, and public trust without the need for new laws. It simply relies on the framework we already have, returning to what has worked for generations. And here's the conclusion. Because auditability and ballot secrecy, evidenced by a strong chain of custody for precinct returns, are federal and state law, we have to return to casting ballots of a precinct together. To do that, we need to assign them to existing polling locations. We also have to give provisionals regardless, and using paper poll books for regular ballots. The rest are provisional. E-poll books to check in all voters and generate proper ballot style. We can accommodate all voters, regular and provisional, with their proper ballot style. We can ensure ballot secrecy, and this is what we have to do. Otherwise, all of our elections are totally unable to be properly audited. Every county does it differently. Heider Garcia of Dallas County redacted all of the ballot info. Clint, his replacement in Tarrant County, has cleverly removed the voter roster by location, so he does not have to redact ballot information. Though this is a clever way to avoid redaction of the actual ballots, this is not auditability. It's a willing cover-up of a larger civil rights issue ordered by the Texas Secretary of State's Office of Elections to protect an unlawful voting system. The Office of Elections is managed by members of election-themed NGOs, which are totally sponsored by voting system vendors. Americans in every state should be asking whether their chief election official or election board is actually serving voters or shielding voting system vendors. When state election staff are tied to vendor-funded nonprofits and redaction orders are used to block scrutiny, it raises legitimate concerns about conflicts of interest and the fair interpretation of state and federal law. Here are my citations, using Texas as an example. We have the best laws anyways, and most of the other states need to catch up to us. But even Texas is being put through the ringer. We need to stand on this, and we need to take Tarrant County back first. How symbolic would that be? We need to secure Tarrant County, return to voting by precinct, like everyone already agrees is the proper thing to do. The cost would be negligible. The production of paper poll books with the list of eligible voters for each precinct. That's it. We'll use more provisional ballots. That is something that you're going to have to accept. People that are working the election, that are opposed to that idea, you're going to have to accept that when we secure this election, there's going to be an initial transition period. I have done an outline for a feasible, practical, affordable shift into a hand-counted by precinct primary. I'm willing to concede that we may be cutting it a little close for training just under 700 counters to process a county the size of Tarrant. I can totally concede that that's an intimidating order. But locking down early voting and election day by precinct is totally feasible. There are a few key questions we need to submit to the Secretary of State. They need to come from our party chairman. I'd appreciate it if everyone in the Tarrant Executive Committee would review this work prior to telling Chairman Davis that we don't have time. Like some of you have told me for well over a year, while you're going on to talk shows, promoting yourself as an election integrity warrior, while I'm in the elections office with Clint, figuring out how to secure these ballot boxes without the scanners on top, taking a tape measure to see how many square feet we have so that early voting counters can be there and process these ballots in the amount of time that those warehouses will be empty on election day, which is the only day we have to count the ballots. I mean, no. Please stop telling Tim and everybody else that it takes 2 years or more to lock a primary down by precinct. Stop waiting on other counties to fall flat on their face so that you can justify your lackadaisical attitude. Stop waiting on the legislature to fix literally everything when we have power at the local level. How can you expect our elected officials to stand on anything when you won't? We have ground this down to the most feasible aspect, and the one that most people agree is the most crucial change to make. By the way, the same philosophy that we would use to secure election day by precinct would be used to secure early voting by precinct as well. Because, just a reminder, neither of those laws at the state level, early voting countywide access law or countywide polling place program, which applies to election day, neither one of those laws guarantees voters a regular non-provisional ballot. And they can't. Federal law says that if federal law says auditable paper trail. Casting ballots countywide requires the redaction of records so that we can't pull ballots. That destroys the auditable paper trail. Ballot secrecy is also federal law. I should probably cite that in here. It's cited in the report for Bo. Or now for Chairman Davis. We have to guarantee voters ballot secrecy. We have to ensure an auditable paper trail. Okay? And we have a chain of custody, but for what? For a bunch of unauditable records. We need to restore the integrity to our chain of custody by actually having the precinct returns that we're reporting out in the precinct reports. We need to have those returns ready, compiled together, ready to be examined. Redaction of the ballots, redaction of voter turnout information does not fix the ballot secrecy issue. And I'm quite disappointed with anybody who accepts that as the remedy. Thank you for listening to this. Thank you to the people who have been drafting and working towards a resolution to lock this primary down by precincts. Not just to say, oh, we support that idea, but when it comes down to it, we're going to oppose it. That needs to stop. Share this video, share this report. You can find more at tbtr.us. I highly endorse the echo hand count method, and you can see more of that at countwithecho.org. That's my favorite method. I don't have anything to do with designing that, but that's my favorite method. That's most people's favorite method. If you check out my video on YouTube called Fastest Hand Counters in the West, that's myself, my 13-year-old daughter, and Marilyn Miles, counting 34 races on 50 ballots in under an hour and a half. Thank you, guys. Please share this out. Please help me stand on this. It's extremely important. Bye.
Representative Roy Logoles also raised questions about what he calls erratic date and timestamps. Wallace asked Smartmatic why the automated system didn't have precautionary functions to ensure the date and time in the machines were correct. Garcia of Smartmatic says the timestamps in the machines were only to record the sequence of action, but would not say exactly when these actions took place. At this, committee chairman Teodoro Locsin lost his temper, slamming Smartmatic anew for misleading lawmakers about its system.
If this sequence can be delayed to 10 in the evening, what the heck? My God. Sir, your assurance was that anything that happens between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. would be reflected 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I didn't know that 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. could be moved to 10 in the evening. Do you realize what a fool you have made?
Sir,
the legislators who passed this law?
I understand, sir. With all due respect, it's an unforeseen situation. It's one
unforeseen?
Yes, sir.
That was the principal guarantee that this would be an honest election. That we would know digitally what would happen during election day and during the election hours.
And you do, sir, if I may.
No, forget that. You had us standing here guaranteeing to the public and the world that even if fraud is committed, we would be able to trace it. We never said that fraud could not be committed. But you said we could trace it. And now you tell me that at 10 in the evening you could do it and we would never know.